organize pathways for themselves, but for their communities and the world in which they live.
It's a huge honor, but really, it means more responsibility.
So the WBC Trailblazer and Gender Equity and Diversity Award is a recognition by WBC of individual leaders who have implemented innovative change for themselves, their communities, and the globe. Tonight, Women Business Collaborative is honored to recognize Her Excellency, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the 7th Director General of the World Trade Organization. She is the first woman and the first African to lead the WTO. As well, she is the first woman to serve as Minister of Finance and Minister of Foreign Affairs for the government of Nigeria. And we were just speaking about your 25-year career at the World Bank, ultimately being a managing director. So, as the CEO of the Women Business Collaborative, and as a friend, I am deeply honored and thrilled to award you the WBC Trailblazer Award for Gender Equity and Diversity.
Thank you.
Shall we sit down and have a conversation?
I'm so deeply honored.
So let's put this here. So Your Excellency, as we just spoke, you are a trailblazer. Not only as the Director General of the World Trade Organization, you've managed to inject momentum back into the global economy. We were just speaking about that, whether she got a break over the holidays. But you've also done something else too. You've helped get the global economy back on track. You've expanded the global economy by making it more inclusive. So if I've had my team at Women Business Collaborative crunch the numbers, and this is what they look like. In 2019, the number of women WTO directors was 22%. And today, women are 43% of WTO directors. But let's not stop there. 50% of the 4 deputy director generals are women. So I think we all know why you do it. So let's talk about the why, but let's talk about how you do it. And how might others have this same success in diversifying leadership?
Well, thank you so much. It's a lifelong commitment, and I know that we are all here because we're committed. The question you have to ask yourself is, when you get the opportunity, how can you leave wherever you have that opportunity without making use of it to advance the cause of women? So that's the question I've asked myself my entire career when I get into a place. How do I make sure that this phenomenon of first this, first that is not, that we don't come back to that? So let me just say about being first. Of course, I'm honored to be the first woman and the first African. But for me, success is when we no longer have these first this and first that. Yeah. When it becomes just, there's a woman CEO, a woman leader, and she's done a good job or she's not. So that's the first success. But beyond that, to me, it's just what you said. When you get the opportunity, what else do you do with it? So before coming back to the WTO, let me just say, when I was Minister of Finance of Nigeria, the first woman and also the longest serving for 7 years in 2 terms. And I tell you, if you can serve that long as a finance minister, then I think you can, in a tough country like mine, then you can pretty much weather many other situations. But, I remember during the time, just a personal anecdote, there were a lot of women's groups and, my alumni of my former secondary schools, and they used to invite me to occasions. And many times I couldn't come. And I tried to explain to them that what I'm focused on here is to do the very best job I can, so that next time there'll be no question about hiring a woman. They won't even think about it. It will be natural. And that's what I tried to do, to deliver the best job I could. And I am so glad, because since I became finance minister, there have been 3 more women. In fact, absolutely, right after me, they appointed a woman, and since then, two more women. So now it's nothing strange to have the same with foreign affairs. I was the first woman foreign affairs minister, and even though I spent a very brief period, but during that period, I think some of the actions I took, for instance, I was the very first to evacuate my fellow citizens from a conflict zone. I remember when there was trouble in Lebanon and people were flying their citizens out, and I had just been in office 2 weeks, and I asked the director, are there Nigerians there? Are we evacuating them? And they looked at me very strangely. Nobody had ever asked that question. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we did that. So we did a few things that were novel, and the next person was a woman.
Exactly.
And then a deputy minister, a woman. So at the WTO, I just tried to do the same. We've never had 50% women deputy directors general. We've done it. One left, and she's just been replaced by another woman. But I hasten to say something. These women are not being hired because they're women. That's not my objective. My objective is to hire the top person for the job. But if a woman and a man are as good, if a woman is as good or better, of course she'll be given the preference and hired, because there are just not enough women in leadership. And I really did tell them when I was competing for the job of WTO, I was a little bit cheeky. And I said, it's nice to know I would be the first woman and the first African. But that's not my motivation. The organization needs a competent leader. It needs a lot of reforms. That's what you should be looking for, And I turned to them and said, I believe I'm the most competent, but that should be your mark. And I think that's the most important.
And it's that expertise that we're going to hear and talk about. It's being the first and then continuing. I did an index on women's leadership in government. In Nigeria, because of your presence in the Door You Open, has consistently had more women in the economy and foreign affairs than even somewhere like the United States. So it's just an interesting way of advancing that expertise.
We had the first female finance minister before the United States.
Absolutely.
So Janet Yellen is the first.
Exactly.
Amazing.
So let's come to the WTO and kind of today in 2024. What I loved is after COP28, you said something that I tell my team at Women Business Collaborative all the time. We are faster together. We can fight climate change faster if and only if we do it together. So, as we build an economy and a global supply chain that combats climate change, how do we make sure that we're expanding access to include women and minority-owned businesses?
Well, thank you. That's a very important question. And I'll come at it this way. First, I want people to know that I'm one of those who believes very strongly that climate change is an existential threat, and we've got to fight it with every instrument. And the question I asked myself when I took the job is, how can trade be part of the solution? Most people think of trade as part of the problem because of the emissions from the logistics of trade. Shipping, 3% of greenhouse gas emissions, aviation, less than 2%. But what can trade do that is positive? And within that, how about women? And so the issue for me is then I looked, what is the future of trade? And I believe the future of trade is digital, it's green, and it must be inclusive. And so if you think of that, then you think about women as part of the inclusion. And we are at a unique juncture where digital trade is growing faster than goods trade. And digitally delivered services trade is growing even faster. And we know that green trade is going to move, is going to be a wave of the future. So with that combination, women have been doing well in terms of trading digitally. In fact, it has opened a window for women because they can reach out if they are connected. They can reach out to the world and sell their goods and services. And I noticed, by the way, that there are many women in the green sector who are selling sustainable fashion and other goods. Actually, I meant to bring tonight a bag made out of waste that I bought. Very, very lovely and elegant, but I forgot. And so my connection is, how can we then support women, expand opportunities? We all know what, women face. In trade, our studies show that women who export earn 2.8 times more than those who sell domestically. So the issue is, how can we, from the WTO side, help to expand opportunities? How do we remove the supply side constraints that they face? We have an affiliate called International Trade Center with a marvelous executive director. And their job is to help us remove this supply side constraints, to try and improve access to finance. Women often face issues about the quality of products they sell and the standards. If you're going to go into the export market, many countries have certain standards they have to meet. So from developing countries, for instance, how do we support them to meet the quality standards? How do we help access to finance? How do we help with knowledge about export markets? So these are the kinds of things we can do. We're not a financing institution, but we have the technical capacity to do these things, and that's where we've been focusing. I think the second thing is scale. A lot of the things we do are like pilot projects, especially in developing countries. A small group of women here, a small group there, and it's successful. But if we are to get bigger success, we have to scale. So I'm now focusing on how can the WTO partner with other organizations that have the resources so that we can scale things. So just practically now, I'm trying to, we are aiming to raise a $50 million fund to scale the actions of our sister organization, the ITC, in terms of helping women who are trading digitally, expand their businesses, remove obstacles in their way. And I hope to raise this by the end of February when we have our 13th ministerial in Abu Dhabi. And then we partner with the World Bank or the IFC to try to scale that up. And I'm looking at Rita Jo and possible partnerships in that direction. So that's the way we are trying to see. Let me end by saying that we also need to look at trade agreements to ensure that we begin to introduce a perspective on women so that women are treated equally. We've done one, I'm very proud, the Services Domestic Regulation. It's a plurilateral agreement to remove obstacles in the way of services trade. And for the first time, we have a provision that makes sure that women are not discriminated against in terms of provision of these services and access. So we need to do much more of that, and we're focused on doing that.
I love that because it's the policy, it's the technical assistance, it's the finance, and the word scale. Like this is not some side thing over here. This is what is important to drive the economy.
Yeah, I hope my gender advisor is here with me, so I hope I'm not missing. Where's Nicole? I can't see her. Oh, you're in the front.
She's nodding, I think.
So I'm not
right?
messing up. I'm not.
So you heard it, though. End of February, it's a $50 million target. Is that correct?
No, the fund will be 50. Yep. But my first aim is to get 25 million first.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see how we do. I have some promises. We're going to launch it, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. I'm ready to see what happens. The momentum is there. Yeah. So we've talked also as another, what you called it, sort of geopolitical tension and existential threat to women's economic empowerment is, how do we look at this global economy right now? There's a little bit of pushback, there's a little bit of fear, but how do we ensure that it doesn't reverse the progress or introduce new inequities generally? You talked about, the developing economies and so forth. How do we look at the system today that we don't reverse or make worse the inequities?
Well, the global economy of today is so full of uncertainties because of the number of conflicts that we're dealing with. As we speak, we've got two, the war in Ukraine, the war between Israel and Gaza and Hamas, with that threatening to widen as we see. So my first prayer or hope is if we can find a way to stop the conflicts, because that will stop a great deal of the uncertainty. If we can find a way to diplomatic solutions, if these things don't escalate, because the more they do, the more the global economy is impacted, the more inflation. You can see what's happening with the attacks on the Red Sea, that already the cost of container shipping has gone up more than 100%. The cost by having to go 10 days extra, ships are having to pay $1 million more in fuel costs. We've just calculated, along with some other studies that have been done, people have been looking at the impact. And we all estimate about a 20 to 23% extra tariff for the delays. You know, there's some components in the supply chain that are so time sensitive. The extra 10 days results in the equivalent of a 23% tariff. So stopping this will help us manage uncertainties. But we also have the uncertainty of climate change, which is always there. We don't know what's going to happen. A drought here, flood here, fires here. You can see the Panama Canal because of drought conditions. You know, you cannot have as many container ships, and we have the Suez. So that's the first. But that being said, in that context, women get disadvantaged when the global economy is not doing well. Generally, many don't do well, but women who are already behind may even be further behind. So my thoughts on how do we, in these situations, target women specifically with the instruments we have. Remember that during the pandemic, governments did a lot of fiscal stimulus to try to manage the effects of the pandemic and stimulate the economy. As these uncertainties increase, my mind goes to how do we get the resources to make sure that women entrepreneurs, at least on the trading side, are better supported, that they are not, that the obstacles do not multiply in their way. And I think it's from the supply side, short of being able to do the diplomatic thing, we can't, we are not in control. What do we do specifically? And that's the way, and I think a lot of other executives in multilaterals, also think in that way. How do we work together? We're actually collaborating together better with the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO to try and see what we can do to deliver. So, but you notice in all these conflicts, women are nowhere to be seen.
Nowhere. No.
There are no women involved. It's all the men. I'm sorry, men.
But the other fact is if women sign peace treaties, they're 35% more likely to last 15 years or more.
I
so
didn't know
going
that.
back to the involvement of women in, at the policy level, at the leadership level, and so that's an interesting point as we think through the collaboration.
It is very interesting. I mean, we're not trying to be too cavalier about it. I mean, you may have women leaders who may even be the same or even more,
Protectionist.
Conflictual, but women, but there's been experience, as you say, with women really trying to strive for peace, women really trying to go the extra mile for diplomatic solutions, and I just wish we had a few more women interjected in some of these conflicts. It may be able to make a difference.
It would, yeah, I believe it would. And this kind of leads up to sort of I love the collaboration piece, because that's part of why we're here today with this award from Women Business Collaborative. It's part of our conversation that we're going to continue to have with the women leading trade and economies. But the other piece of what you're talking about, is what I tell my team all the time, is that, numbers don't lie. Like you said, we know that women in business is good for company profits, it's good for GDP. And if you want to boost GDP in any country, it's not rocket science, right? You open the markets, right? So let's end with your call to action for those who are listening right now and looking into 2024. What is your call to action?
Well, I'll preface my call to action with some more numbers. The World Bank did a recent study in 2022 that showed that women are 25% less likely to start a business than men. But if they had the same opportunity, you would have a $5 to $6 trillion addition to the world economy. the numbers are so substantial, and that it really behooves us to do everything we can to integrate women and support them in the world economy as much as we can. And that sort of supports the drive. So my call to action is about, yes, how do we integrate women more on the trade side? The call to action I have is, how do we get more of our trade agreements to be gendered, to have a specific look at how these agreements will impact on women, or whether there's an additional thing we could add that would help women more. So that's a call to action. I think a second part is how to scale actions, scale activities that women are doing wherever we are. Because as I look at it, particularly in developing countries, there's too much of piloting. And I really want us to reach millions, thousands and millions, and not hundreds. Yep. So call to action to remove obstacles on the supply side for women and scale. And that's what this fund we're raising is trying to do. It's small, but it can leverage, if we partner with others, it can leverage 3 to 4 times more. How do we scale? How do we get our agreements gender sensitive? And how do we make sure that women are not disadvantaged in terms of selling their products, integrating into supply chains? How do we get businesses when there's a whole movement on to try to deconcentrate supply chains. Yep. And we're really behind that. I think it will build resilience worldwide. So when we do that and we encourage businesses to consider developing countries when they deconcentrate, how do we make sure that there is inclusion of women in that supply chain? That's my call to action. Those are the things that are bothering me. That's what I'm focusing on.
That is perfect. I'm trying to figure out this sentence where you say collaboration for gendered trade agreements that will scale inclusivity in the supply chain for women and women-owned businesses and the growth of it, which is fantastic. So, there are so many people here in Washington, D.C., around the country and around the world who've offered their congratulations to you for joining this prestigious group of trailblazers. 2 of them are here tonight, and they're going to be joining us shortly. But one of them wanted to be here. And ladies and gentlemen, here is a message from the U.S. Trade Representative, Catherine Tai.
Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Tai, the United States Trade Representative, and it is my pleasure to be part of tonight's celebration as we honor my good friend, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as she receives the Trailblazer in Gender Equity and Diversity Award from the Women Business Collaborative. As you all know only too well, working women face real challenges in economic participation, from the systemic and structural to the personal. And that is why WBC's work is so critical, to further gender equity and diversity, to lift up women of all backgrounds and to equip them to succeed, to cultivate inclusive environments not just for today, but also for future generations. Dr. Ngozi embodies all of these principles. She is a legend in the field of international economics and development. She worked at the World Bank for 25 years and served 2 terms as Nigeria's finance minister. And for the last 3 years, she has been leading the World Trade Organization as the first woman and the first African to serve as its Director General. We have worked closely together ever since, including at the 12th Ministerial Conference in Geneva. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that Dr. Ngozi's leadership was monumental throughout that ministerial. Her dedication and resolve were the reasons why the WTO's 164 member economies were able to come together and deliver important outcomes that matter to working people and communities. And she has not relinquished her fire as we work to tackle today's challenges and build a more inclusive and fair global economy. This is what it looks like to lead with purpose. And Dr. Ngozi continues to inspire countless others, including me. I want to thank the Women Business Collaborative for allowing me to celebrate my dear friend on her selection as a trailblazer. Let's continue to work together, all of us, to change the status quo, not just to shatter individual glass ceilings, but to pave the way for others and to build up future women trailblazers. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Dr. Ngozi.